The Group Practice Boss Conference tickets are on sale now. We expect them to sell out in just a couple days. There are only 120 of these available. Head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/conference to read more and grab your ticket. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1127. Welcome to the Practice of Practice podcast. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and I am so excited that you are hanging out with me today. Today, we are giving you behind the scenes in regards to our membership communities. And so a lot of our consultants are doing teachings every single week. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have live teachings going on in our membership. So we wanted to give you a little behind the scenes. So we're going to be hearing from Nicole Ball, talking about what to do when referrals are slow, HR basics with Andrew, client retention with Ashley, scaling with Nicole Ball, choosing the right project management systems, and all sorts of other things over the coming weeks. I can't wait to dig into this with you. If you want help from one of our consultants, please head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply. I'll chat with you for 30 minutes to determine if one of our membership communities or consulting might be right for you. Now let's get started with this episode.
Well, welcome everybody. I think everybody I've seen at least once through here at this point. It's been a while. How's everybody's summer going? Good, bad, terrible, awful, awesome? Everybody ready for the chaos to end with how this year's going just socially? I've got half my clients are freaking out and the other half are unaware completely. So it's kind of interesting with that too. So we're here to talk about systems. I'm the system nerd guy. So today is it's the project management stuff. So what do people know about I'm assuming everybody here, because this is Group Practice Boss, has at least a group of people that they're trying to coordinate. And it's a circus and it's always an ongoing thing, it feels like, to try and get all of that kind of sorted out and established. Things I noticed just as my practice grew was myself and then one or two other people. Doesn't require any new systems, kind of works just the same way as it does as like solo practice. And then kind of when you get to that fourth person, which usually has some kind of administrative role, and you're trying to coordinate across multiple different systems and do kind of that group project thing like we all remember and dread from grad school, and having to do that all over again and trying to coordinate in a better way. When you hit that kind of fourth person, that's where things start to get complicated. And then as you scale, it's that Karen's heard me talk about this, just trying to think ahead about, like, if I move into this system, is it going to grow with me, or is it one of those things that is going to be temporary while I'm in this kind of tier or phase of like practice growth and scaling? So maybe it's a system that covers that 3 to 6, and then if you hit 6 and above, then you're gonna have to rethink things. So try to think about those bigger systems like EHRs and cost effectiveness and phone systems and these things. Project management is going to be, how do you kind of tie all that stuff together and kind of have communication workflows and organize those things. So there's some options. If you've done any one-on-one consulting with POP in the past year or earlier, you've probably run into a system called Trello, which kind of works on this idea of like what's called a Kanban. So the idea is, in short, if I was doing a PowerPoint with this, I'd have like fun memes and stuff, because I always seem to have fun memes. But the idea is, if you've seen Sunny, even if you haven't seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I haven't seen the show, there's this shot of one of the characters in there that's got a board, and there's all these like pictures and there's strings connected, and it's just like, see what I mean? Like, kind of crazy looking meme. And the idea, I guess, behind a Kanban is if you could organize that to like, here's stuff that I need to do. So you kind of chunk out your to-do list and like individual Post-its. And then here's the one thing that I'm working on right now, to try and limit your attention and keep it really focused on the one thing you're working on. And then when you're done, you stick it in the done pile. And then that done pile gets bigger as you accomplish different things. And it works on this idea or like concept or philosophy of like, we really can only work on one thing at a time, because that's really all we can ever do. So even if you're kind of juggling 2 or 3 or 4 different projects in your head, you're only ever really paying attention to one of those at a time and working on one of those at a time when you go to do it. So the idea and philosophy around a Kanban is to kind of reduce the overwhelm that can happen from a to-do list that's going to be miles and miles and miles long and probably disorganized, and have different things about, here's my grocery list and my laundry and chores I need to do at home intermixed with, like, I need to redo this blog for the website and these other things. It kind of all gets overloaded in that to-do list format. So platforms like Trello with the board view are kind of there to try and help you chunk things out into manageable things, try and pick one or two things to work on at once, and then check it off your list and it's done, and give you the really good satisfaction of, see this stack of things I've done. So that's Trello in a nutshell. There's another platform called Asana, which, if you're starting to do consulting with Pop, I know Brent's one of my new consulting one-on-one people. We're in a platform called Asana. I'm still learning how to use it, but it's a much more robust version of like what Trello is. And so you get a board view and some other different types of views, but the idea is still kind of the same, to where how can you kind of have a better visual representation and kind of organize out more complex projects and tasks, and most importantly, coordinate that with at least one other person. So there are people that use things like Trello to kind of organize themselves, and here's my to-do list and task list kind of thing. But where these platforms really, really, really start to shine is if you have two or more people that are trying to work on the same project at the same time. You can identify what the tasks are and start to delegate those things out, so that the work isn't getting done redundantly. You kind of know it's assigned to, Corey or Michelle, or as they're like, everybody's got their own part of things. So it's a way to kind of collectively bring all that together. There are some other platforms that kind of work in this world too. So for what my practice is, so right now, I hired another full-time person in the spring. I just started another part-time person. I've got somebody going on maternity leave. We are kind of, and I also just got a new admin person. So I have basically like somebody that's kind of 2/3 of rolling, and then I have two really brand new people that are kind of learning how my whole circus works. And what I'm trying to really diligently do this time is really document what that looks like, because as I've grown, kind of the procedures of things have changed, and especially after switching over to W-2, where I can kind of say, here's how I want you to cook this recipe, versus contractors, which is, here's the end result is what I need. I'm trying to do a little better as I go and build a plane as we fly it, to kind of document how the whole thing went together, so that my next hire process goes a little more smoothly and everything's kind of more put together. So right now I'm in a platform called Notion. Notion's cool. I really like it. For the people who spend some time around me, I'm the guy that likes to have all the customization and like to build everything from scratch. It's generally my preference. It does really great for, if your end goal for having a project management kind of system is going to be to create something that could kind of work like an employee interface. So if you've ever worked for a company, and I think most of us have, it's that kind of thing. If you like, say, sign into their HR portal and they have all the different things you have to do as you onboard, and have an interface and like a Wikipedia and a FAQ and all these other different information things. If you want an interface that does everything in that sense, Notion is probably it. What I'm finding after spending about 6 months in Notion, and came at the recommendation of my previous admin, it's more work than I want to do. Because what I'm finding is I'm trying to go through and kind of help coordinate my two kind of back of house people, as to use restaurant terms. So my new admin person, and then my kind of operations. My partner does some operations and HR kind of related things. We're having a discussion this week about, do we want to stay in Notion, because it feels like every time we want to go set something up to coordinate, we have to build the entire everything from scratch, even though there's templates. And so in looking at the amount of time it's taking to figure out if we want to coordinate on this system, would it just be easier to like literally draw things out on a to-do list and a map, and we check things off that way? That's a way to do it. But that, right now, for our experience with Notion, because it's complicated, and because you were assembling a Lego kit from scratch with tubs of Legos, Notion just feels for us a little cumbersome. So it's great if the end goal is you want to build a big portal. It's not great for ongoing tasks and ongoing projects, is what we're finding. Even though you can sort of make it work that way, it's just really not cut out for that. And so I have a feeling we're probably going to move over to Asana, so we can coordinate things like, when we have a new hire, here's our template of task and a walkthrough process that we can replicate, and include the new hire person on this, so that they can kind of do things like, here's your MPI number, and here's a place for you to submit your CAQH information, and all these other different things that go along with hiring and getting things set out. And then also kind of they can track their progress through like our training videos, are outside training stuff that has to do with documentation and other things. They can kind of checklist through things that way. And there's a more discernible flow, and you have a format that's already set up to just say out of the box. You can plug and play to this existing workflow and tweak it as needed, but you don't have to build a workflow from scratch and literally build a table that the workflow is going to then get built on from scratch along with everything else that goes with it, which is, I think, where we are currently running into bottlenecks with Notion and are kind of getting more frustrated with it as an interface and an option. So, in short, like, you're not going to really hear me say this too often, but Notion's more than I need and more complicated than I want to set up. So usually that's what I want. I want to do other things in my life than set up another software system at the moment. So from a project management standpoint, the coordination thing, I think Notion's a bit overkill for most of us. And again, there's some really good kind of comparisons of like a platform like, say, Asana versus Notion. I will be sure to drop those in at the end of this. But in short, project management is just kind of how you are coordinating your team on the back end and those types of things. So in a nutshell, that's kind of project management stuff. Some other things that my new admin person made me aware of. So on the lighter end of things, if you really are just wanting to have like a simple to-do list between you and one other person, if you're in Google Workspace, there's a thing called Google Keep and there's a thing called Google Tasks. And both of those tend to work pretty well, it turns out, if you're just trying to coordinate with you and one other person. So not so much a team thing, but maybe just the pairing, not trying to coordinate 3 to 5 different people or maybe a whole team of people about everyone needs to update their calendars so that we can kind of implement a new calendar system kind of thing.
Is that on Workspace?
Keep and Tasks, yes, and they actually both have apps. And my understanding too is because they are built into Google, they should be covered under they're not additional plugins, in other words. So they're part of the Google ecosystem as it comes. So that should be, both of them should be covered by your BAA.
Wait.
Yeah. So they should also be HIPAA compliant from that sense. The HIPAA question does come up a bunch, and I'm on some Facebook groups for some other group practice owner oriented types of groups, and even just there's a local group in Asheville that I'm a part of that's a fellow group owners and stuff. And the question of, is this software platform going to protect PHI and things like that as needed? That's something to look into. I think both Notion and I know Notion will, I think Asana will as well. You can price up to a tier that is going to like do the HIPAA compliance for you. The simplest way to do it is to just limit the number of places you have PHI in the first place and keep them from talking with one another. So, this is why a lot of people just really advocate only client messaging should go through an EHR, because then you don't have to worry about having additional like encryption layers for Google Workspace or Hushmail or these other platforms. You can kind of compartmentalize things, and then there's less likely to have a breach because there's no it's not showing up in multiple places. But I'm curious, like, given people's different sizes, how are people kind of currently coordinating things? Other things that you'll kind of hear about trying to tie communication together are, things like Slack and other stuff like that, which is it's just another chat platform is really all it is. You could use Google Chat with a Google Workspace and have HIPAA compliance through that. Some EHRs have team messaging and stuff, so you can do things within the EHR. So there's the chat communication channel. There's how do you maybe have a to-do list between you and one other person, and this is more about what are some ongoing projects about. We want to add 5 pages to the website of these particular things, and Michelle's going to write the one on PTSD and Karen's going to write the one on existential crisis or whatever, and you can kind of task things out in a collective project space. So that's more of what today is about, is that kind of central hub of that coordination among different things. So what are people currently doing, or are people kind of realizing like some coordination would be helpful, but they're not just sure how to do it? Where are people at with their different systems in place?
Honestly, we've just been using Excel for a lot of things. It's very, it's just not very helpful. We keep revisiting the system, the idea of getting some type of a project management system in place, but I feel overwhelmed by it. I think we had tried Asana at one point. I also got into Notion. Have you heard of August Bradley? He has like this whole system that he uses in Notion, specifically just for like personal, like your to-do list, all of the things. It's, I would say it's like similar to the getting things done kind of, idea or platform for kind of staying organized for busy people. But it's like a different version, and he's like sells his templates and everything. So everything is like there for you, but it doesn't help us coordinate group stuff. And so we're definitely looking for something, but I don't know. I'm like, as you were talking, Andrew, about like, building something from scratch, you just don't have the time for all of that. But Notion has so many different capabilities. I almost wonder if there's somebody out there that's using Notion with a small business and like has their templates for sale. I don't know, but
so I can speak a bit about Notion because, like I said, my previous admin person who was the goal with her was to kind of get this set up, and it didn't happen, which is why I've replaced this person. So again, they recommended Notion. Notion to me, it just, if I had the time and I was still a student and wasn't trying to coordinate a whole business with 4 clinicians, and one's about to go on maternity leave and one's got jury duty today. I mean, they're like navigating all of those things, which are, they're new. Like, what do I do? I'm like, well, you just cancel the client, reschedule. They're like, do I charge? I'm like, no, you don't. Like, just, they're new. This is just part of what we do, right? It's kind of part of being the boss thing. But to me, like, you're right. Like, even with, one of the things I talked about earlier this summer was CRMs, and I'm in a platform called Therasas, and we're still building it out. And so in hiring my new admin, that was like the primary thing. I was like, I want you to get this implemented. And I'm like, I don't have the time to do this. Their support's really awesome. They know you're coming on board, so please work with them. Here's kind of our target goals of functionality and kind of let's get them done. I realize it's going to take you time, but can you become enough of an expert on this to then explain it to me like I'm 5? And so she's doing an awesome job with that. It's great. So I need to figure out why the like newsletter opt-in thing's not popping up on my website, but it's built, it's working. We have a new client submission form that's getting linked to like auto response stuff for scheduling. This week we're getting calendars across clinicians so people can book free consults. It's going really well. But in talking about the project management thing, she was kind of talking about right now she's using Google Keep with the other practice she works with. It's actually this is Jen Morley's assistant from Kick. Yeah, so I've got her assistant like part-time, and Jen's got her 3/4 time. So it's been really good and working out really well. So she already has some ideas about how it's meant to work in a group practice and what does work, and they coordinate things obviously different than I do. But she was kind of in this ongoing dialogue we're having this week about what system do we want to kind of stick with for coordinating. Everyone's kind of frustrated with Notion because it's just too much setup. There are templates you can do in there, but even this week I was trying to, and I have 2 paid seats, I think, with them. So I've got access to the template library that's included. Some of it's there, but again, it's just so overkill, I guess is kind of the thing. Just from a business owner standpoint of like, I don't want a system that's going to take 20 hours for people to feel like they can just create a single project that says, check this box off when you're done. I mean, and that's kind of how Notion feels like, even with the guide videos. And I've worked in a lot of systems. It's got the Netflix problem. So, or the YouTube problem where you're like, hey, I just think I'll veg out for half an hour. Let me find something to watch on Netflix. And you start scrolling through your list. And after 20 minutes, you quit because you've looked at a bunch of things you could watch and never made a decision. And so it's like decision fatigue. It kind of has that for me. And I also don't know that it's the most, what I want something is, and I think where Asana and Trello kind of comes into play a bit nicer, and where the spreadsheets run into problem is you get, at some point, the amount of information that's in front of you overloads your visual field, and you check out. It just, instead of it being like individual words and sorted, it just becomes this background noise, and it could be wallpaper. It loses all meaning, right? And for me, like Notion kind of has that feel. Again, it's kind of really cool. It's amazing what you can do with it. If the goal is to say the project is we need to like write 10 blogs for the website and assign it to 5 different people, it doesn't do that very well, right? So I'm glad to know there's stuff like that available for Notion. And one of the things that I sent out last night to my team of people to kind of sort things, I can pull up really quick. So I'll take their email and find it. But it had to do with somebody talking through the 2 differences or big differences between Asana versus Notion, and kind of compare them side by side. And honestly, like from a free level functionality, you actually get a better deal out of Asana, even though there's still a learning curve there. And I think for me, at least partly like my draw to doing Asanas is what practice of the practices moved over to. So at least for me as my own person, like it'll be easier for me to just do the one system because Asana is going to be something practice of the practice uses, seems to work really well. I know even for them, they mentioned Asana probably about a year ago, and really just since about May or June has a lot of the stuff on the back end that coordinates us as a crew really been moved over there. And like Brent, like you just started with me doing one-on-one consulting in the past month. You're the second person I'm working with that is in that platform versus Trello. So that's how, and again, they were building out like a lot of those templates and custom stuff and spent a lot of time building stuff out. So they did what I like to do when I have time, which is really build things out deliberately and intentionally. But sometimes you just need something to coordinate everybody and get it going as fast as possible. And Notion's definitely not it. I think what Asana does right out of the box that Notion doesn't do is Asana gives you, here's a basic, like, here's my pile of things I need to do. I can add one or two other things to pay attention to. And then you can kind of move into like, here's what I'm working on right now. I can assign things, all of that kind of basic template of here's what a project and the key ingredients. That comes right out of the box. And so kind of once you learn that and learn a few things about adjusting that template, the rest of it gets to be really easy. Whereas Notion's like, I was trying to make a checklist into like one of these kind of task board things. And some of it's, I'm sure, just my lack of understanding about how to really use Notion and move between types of things. But Notion's cool because you kind of have pages and you can do a lot of things with pages. So you can kind of build things out in like blocks, like you're building out a website and you just kind of go through, I want to make this a heading. You can select things in bulk and change what they are. You can't so much go from that to like what they call a database, which would be that task board to where, all of us show up as possible people that are assigned different tasks. You get a list of tasks in a project. There's not an easy back and forth. And for me, I want some of that ease of use kind of stuff. And just Notion's amazing if you have the time to really learn it. But if you don't want to learn the entire English language, I don't know that Notion's going to be your favorite thing. So you said you are in Notion or you're doing just spreadsheets?
I have started using Notion, but I'm using the templates that August Bradley has put out. He has this whole like organizational system, and I just need something. I have trying to juggle way too many things, and I have 500 things on each to-do list, personal work, like all the different things. And so, he has this pretty cool system called Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults. And it's this whole system. Like I said, it's kind of similar to like getting things done, where you just like, it's a system that somebody else has put together, which is what I need just to keep track of all my things. I'm like, somebody just has to teach me what to do because I've tried so many different things my own way and all of them have failed. So yeah, I'm just using, I haven't built anything from scratch in Notion. He's built it all. And then like, he just sells these templates. So that's been helpful.
I think for me, the thing about Notion is everything feels like I'm having to build it from scratch every time I go to do things. And granted, like I'm not an expert user of it, but I also don't really have somebody that can kind of walk me through how to become more expert or approach it. Like for me, having worked with so many different systems, and so for background, like coming out of high school and college and in my 20s, I worked stage production and event production, and literally like would have a whole bunch of boxes, and you think about how you're connecting wires together from like a microphone out to the sound system up to the mixing board and back, and like that kind of stuff. And then later did it for video and other things like that. So knowing how those different kinds of systems work and how like even just if we're interconnecting video boxes versus audio boxes, you plug them in differently, like they work differently. So the key to doing that is understanding the designer of that system. How did they think about using it? Like, how did the engineer think about this being used? And one of the big criticisms between technicians or auto mechanics and engineers is engineers think about how it looks good on paper. They don't think about how to work on it. And so that technician role is kind of really like what I did for a lot of years. And so for me, the hard thing with Notion is I haven't quite, in 6 months of spending time in it, quite understood how they envision using it, even though I've heard people talk about it and there's things that my brain hasn't really clicked with it, I guess is it. And so that kind of makes it a little challenging to feel like, oh, okay, so now that I'm up to this point, I know how to go drive this. Right.
Yeah. Do you, with how much you've used Asana so far, have you come across any limitations of the system? Like you wish that it did more?
I'm really pretty new to Asana. For me, it looks like Trello on steroids. So at least the layout and how it's meant to be used, like that works pretty well. Some of the things that are in there that are pretty cool, and I realized Notion, kind of playing around a little bit this weekend, can do. Oh no, actually, like let me take that back. I wasn't actually doing that in Notion. Oh, I know what I was doing. I was setting up Brent's board in Asana. And so there's on a card, one of the things in Trello, which I found really limiting was the card I thought was oversimplified and you couldn't really it felt very fixed, and even the kind of stuff you want to like go in and do subtasks on a card. So the idea is like, write 5 blog posts. And so you create a card, write 5 blog posts, then you could kind of do a checklist on like a Trello board. And that was about all the detail you really got. What's actually really cool about Asana is you can kind of go in and say, hey, here's my 5 blog post card, and that kind of sits in the board, and here's what's ongoing at the moment. And then there's a little kind of thing that comes out to show how many subtasks are there, and you can kind of check boxes off, and so you can kind of do a project within a project. I think is really nice and fits my brain in terms of thinking about, I think in flowcharts in a way. So here's like, if you've ever seen like a map of an organization of like, here's the boss and the underlings and their underlings and on down, in a way, project management, or to-do list, I can get that way. So I want to know the overall big project, and then here's the subtasks, and then the mini tasks that go into that subtask is kind of it. And Asana seems like it really does that fairly well. And I never felt like Trello was able to do that. But like I said, I'm still learning Asana. I do like that you can tag people and do the comments thing, and that works really well. One other thing I think to think about in terms of figuring this out is, and this is one of the things that's already been brought up among my admin people, is not wanting to have an overload of notifications. So like for practice of the practice, like I've told Jen, I'm like, look, I'm going to have notifications turned on so it'll hit my email box. But if you really need to get a hold of me immediately, because I just I can't have a gazillion notifications all the time on my phone. It just got overwhelming. So about a month ago, took all the email accounts off my phone. I have my one business one through Gmail. Notifications are turned off. So I don't know how much is there until I actually go in to pay attention to it. And just let people know, just for my sanity, I can't have 400 unread things all the time, because it just means it stresses me out. So in thinking about whatever system you're going to do, and my admin team was kind of bringing up, right now, the notification system, at least how we're using Notion currently, isn't great. And I think some of we have not organized things in a board task setup, and that's part of the issue. So we're not tracking things through a workflow. We kind of have just a messy to-do list at this point with 3 people working on the same thing. But it could just be a Google Doc with comments at this point, is kind of where we've failed in using Notion. But just thinking about, how many notifications do you want to blast people with when they have tasks and assignment and those kind of things. And so Slack and Asana are both newer systems with POP, and both of those email my inbox. And so I'll go in, and it's I think right now there's 37 unread Slack notifications. I'm I don't know. And half of them came from Asana, because it's all, I'm just it's just noise, right? It doesn't help me know what I really need to do. And so part of this is thinking about how much on blast you're going to put people as they get things assigned, and not wanting to make it overwhelming, because trust me, if you don't already know at the top, you're paying attention to all of them, even if you're not really paying attention to all of them. It's kind of at least in the back of your mind all the time of did Justina do her 5 task things for the day that I got notified in my EHR for? Who knows, right? So trying to just not overwhelm yourself. The goal of this is to not overwhelm yourself in the same way that a to-do list on a checklist or a spreadsheet gets overwhelming, because it's just this wall of text. And wall of different boxes and checklists and things. So I haven't yet run into limits with Asana. I do know that compared to Notion, it's got a whole lot more integrations. I do think you can still do things like embed videos or Looms and other things like that. I know it'll connect to I think the thing I dropped in the chat, I think Notion's got around 80 different integrations, and Asana's got over 200. You actually can integrate Asana and Notion. So partly what we're discussing among micro people is, do we want to leave some of the things we currently have in Notion that maybe are better to do, like a database of like blog post kind of things? Is that a better thing to leave in that kind of more spreadsheet looking format in Notion, because it's not something Asana does naturally, and they just have that track the progress of that and the status of where people are and working on things in the Asana end. So the data really lives in Notion, but it's referred and referenced as a task in task management in Asana, if that makes sense. But I really just want to do one or the other. I don't want to do both. I just want to trim it down, and it can reference my Google Drive, which is a semi-organized mess, because again, you're like, hey, I'll put all of this in one folder, and then you end up with 100 folders, and then you have to go digging around again because there's not a good visual interface, and I get overwhelmed at some point.
Whatever stage your practice is at, we know using great resources with patients is crucial to helping them get better faster. As a practice owner, I never compromised on this, but finding the right materials was a constant challenge. It's so time consuming, especially with everything else to juggle. That's why I recommend Psychology Tools, an online library of over 500 evidence-based resources for whatever problems your clients are facing. Choose practical exercises, handouts, and worksheets, audio therapy, treatment manuals, and loads more. They're even available in multiple languages and formats. Developed by highly qualified psychologists, resources can be downloaded with therapist guidance to enhance skills or client guidance, helping patients make the most of each tool. It's a game changer for saving time when delivering more effective therapy. As well as a great resource library, Psychology Tools is also a smart business tool, boosting productivity and efficiency. Focus on growing your practice while your team feels better prepared for every session. It's a win-win for you and for me and for the client. Visit psychologytools.com/Joe to find out more. Use code JOE24 for 20% off new subscriptions. Again, that's psychologytools.com/Joe to find out more.
I say, and maybe this ages me, because because you even mentioned it, Andrew, of the noise that I feel some of these platforms can create in our lives. I have done Trello and I have done Asana, and I find both of them are just noise and not necessarily useful for accomplishing. And then I find I have other people try to use them with me too, and they don't know how to use them or what to do with them. And then nobody's like, it just becomes a wasted of money because it just sits there. No one uses it. And Asana is not cheap to be putting out there every month. So I don't know, like I'm listening to this, and I would love to hear feedback of like, what are people finding that this thing is really useful for? That it's an important thing to start to use within our practice so that it's more beneficial than just this waster of money.
So a couple things. Both Notion and Asana do a lot on the free platform kind of thing. On Notion, if you happen to be in the Notion platform, you can so on the left side, kind of like a lot of things, there's like a top level view. And so different pages that have stuff within it, you can kind of think of it like, here's a site that's like maybe my HR onboarding, and you got multiple pages within that interface and kind of thing. You can take that and assign a section of it. You can share it with guest users. So you can give guest users that aren't technically a part of your workspace pretty much full access to do kind of a lot of different things that way. So in Asana, I think is free up to 15 users. There's maybe one or two things that you get in the paid tier, but from a free standpoint, you can mix paid versus free. It's not like Google Workspace where it's all or nothing. So there's a lot there, but in terms of like specifically the kind of things that, at least for us, that I'm wanting to organize, because I literally just sent this out last night. So let me pull my email up and show you and go over what I sent to my back end team. What I'm looking at in terms of using a project management system for is projects we happen to be our Therastas setup. So that's our CRM. So in an Asana world, and the people working to set that up, it's really just myself and my admin. So there's only two of us. Things we're using Therasas for and building out or getting their system to work the way we want it is going to be my online free consultation request form, which is live on my website. It's working. Getting that connected to tracking the intake flow or the inquiry flow. So the next thing we're working on is getting free consultation inquiry for waitlist and just getting distributed among things to then connect to clinician calendar so that that inquiry can book a free consultation online within the parameters that a clinician sets, and then track the follow-up of things there. So that would be a Therasas project, would be the form builder, the newsletter sign up thing. Are we using the plan down the road is to use Therasas to like push out to like those kind of things. So managing setup of a system. So that would be a project, obviously. I'm wanting to set up, this is something I think Ashley does in her practice. I want to have an onboarding template for new clinicians and new hires. And so right now there's like I think 2 Google forms that I send out and collects information like what's your MPI numbers, how do you want to be addressed, what letters do I stick behind your name, website copy, have you read this like guide on this certain kind of thing. So there's kind of an initial front end kind of thing. But I would like to have that tied in with have you watched my training videos and how to use my EHR? Have things alongside that for me that I have to do as the person that's like the master on the account, which is like add that clinician to the telehealth, because on my EHR I have to go manually add them to telehealth and have to manually add them to each individual service. And so that's something that they need as part of the like getting them set up in intake queue as an EHR. Some of that's on this other new hire, some of that's going to be on me. And so for me, I'm wanting a way to kind of track where in this process we are for having this person come on board and know where the holdups are there. And that's something that is going to be a bigger onboarding thing, and it's probably going to take the next 2 hires for me to really get that solid and settled out. But that would be a big thing. For me, at least, like I'm going to kind of set up like other things I want to do to my website. And so this isn't so much coordinating among other people. There's going to be some blog post kind of stuff and kind of getting a flow in for that, because several of my new people are interested in doing blog stuff, and I'm working out a way to like a rate for them to get paid that they're agreeable for, probably per post. But just tracking like, hey, let's do a blog post about this, kind of assign it to somebody or who wants to do it, and they can kind of track progress. And so we can kind of see, look at it, they're working on it, deadline's going to be wherever. So these types of projects that go from me to like somebody that I'm assigning, some delegation kind of stuff. I still need to finish out my employee handbook. North Carolina doesn't require an employee handbook until you have 15 people. So I need to clarify some things there. So there's this just from me organization kind of thing. And I'll probably coordinate that with like Trish, my partner, who's been looking over that and kind of building it out there. And that'll eventually kind of incorporate into the workflow. Like, acknowledge, did the employee receive the handbook? And if they sign the page that says, I acknowledge I've received the handbook, and these kind of things. So I guess for me, like most of where I'm eventually going to have this project management thing work is onboarding new clinicians. And I want something that's ready to go enough out of the box, that's built out that I don't have to worry about it, but also something that like is customizable enough I can make it work. I know Ashley, one of the other things that she had mentioned doing and using for Trello, I forget where, I couldn't tell you where I remember her saying this. This was I don't know if it's something I attended or not, but she was saying that she has a Trello board of all of the different things that she needs to do. So on a weekly basis, like here's things as an owner or somebody that's a practice manager role needs to do and make sure they're done. Like, did everybody's notes get done? If you take, just that should be done regardless of whether you take insurance, but did somebody check and make sure all the notes are signed and locked? Do any of the clients have any outstanding bills for copays and other things that need to get run on a Friday afternoon before you close the week out, so we're not carrying a balance going into next week? So that kind of weekly task thing. She's got like a monthly task thing, and then she's got like a yearly task things of things she needs to do. So like a yearly task could be in North Carolina, like, am I paying I think it's $50 to renew with the LCMHC board for my PLLC. So that would be like, here's when that's due, or like a 2-year thing of like a 2-year licensure renewal. Like, did I get all that done? And if there's some lead time on those things, which there often is, like my license expires on the 30th of June. and renews on the 1st of July, but they really want things in about mid-May so they have time to review things if they need to. And so making sure you kind of have that kind of to-do list stuff stacked out, and kind of once you have that board programmed about things you or a practice manager or several people need to pay attention to just to keep the business functional, that are these things we forget about because they only happen once a year, those types of things, right? So there's all kinds of different ways you can do it, and several of you talked about having to-do list management just personally, but this is another way you could kind of have that done. And then whether it's your admin person that says, hey Karen, you need to call it North Carolina Department of Revenue and pay your taxes for the month, for the quarter, or whatever. I started my initial start date for my W-2s was March, and we didn't get it done till April 15th, so I got to call them at some point and be like, I actually don't owe you anything for quarter one for unemployment because I didn't have any employees until mid-April. So can we drop the quarterly report thing? But I need to call them. So, those kind of things are just so that those don't happen and you don't end up delinquent on something. Those types of board management things. And then if you're somebody like me, they can easily forget a thing. Having that other kind of back of house admin person give me a nudge and say, you probably should call this in or get it done because it's due. Is that sort of explaining something how I'm envisioning using it for my practice?
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, and my thought is like, why, like, some of this stuff don't, like, I guess, and maybe it's that idea of this is what ages me. I'm like, this is why you use a calendar and have to-do lists and documents and create those things. Like, why do I need to go to another website to pay for something else or do something else when, like, you can do some of those things with what you already have? And because you had mentioned something about this takes you back to your master's, like, collaboration works. And I'm like, well, that's not necessarily that wasn't my experience, because we didn't do all this like online stuff at that point in time. And so this might just be the way my brain works. It's too much. It's not how I function. And so I'm having a hard time putting it into my practice because it's not necessarily what my brain was trained to think this way. Does that make sense? And that might be where my struggle is coming into.
Another way you could kind of maybe think about the utility of these types of platforms. So if I have a to-do list, like let's say I go into Google Keep and make a to-do list of things that Andrew needs to get done this week. So I'm looking at that because I have notification burnout, like I was saying earlier, it just gets to be noise, right? Like,
and then I ignore it because it's just noise.
Exactly. So it still needs to get done, but it just becomes noise. And so the idea of having some of this linked to, say, a calendar, even like calendar notifications at this point. I mean, so there's this great app, speaking of like not getting overloaded. There's an app called Structured. It's available for the Apple operating ecosystem stuff. I don't know if they have an Android version yet. I have the paid version. They do a lifetime subscription. So I think it was $30. I never have to buy it again. The same license applies on my laptop, my iPad, all of the different things. So what I love about it is I can do a calendar view and I can go to a day. And then I just get today. So this is my today. So the only thing I get is what today is. So right now we're in the middle of this webinar right here. And if I want to check it off, I can't. Yeah, I think it's so if I hit the button over here, I get to check it off, and then it's crossed off my list and it's done. But that's it. So low noise. It ties to lots of different things. I can sideswipe and go over to a different day. Now, if you were to look at like my calendar, of just the calendars I have turned on, like it's a disaster. Like this is what all the stuff stacked up looks like. It's absurd, right? And some of that is because let me get my camera to refocus while I'm talking, but some of it is I have a pop calendar and then I have my business calendar and I have a personal calendar. And because I do my best to protect everybody's info with POP, but it's not the same level. I don't have to be HIPAA compliant with POP consultant people, even though I try and keep everybody private anyway. But I don't have the same need for that, whereas I do for my own practice. And so trying to make sure I can disable names showing up on calendars and stuff that's shared. So basically right now, anything that happens on a POP calendar also gets duplicated on my practice calendar that feeds my EHR because that's the one I look at all the time. But even it looks kind of absurd because stuff gets stacked up. And but that's the best way I can make sure I don't miss things. And so again, trying not to just have overloaded stuff in too many places. If I don't want to look at timeliness of things and just want to look at here's what I need to really actually do, here's what actually matters, that project management thing lets me just think of the tasks that need to get done, not necessarily when they need to get done, but at least just here's my task list. The calendar thing kind of puts it on a timeline. And then the other thing that the project management thing is going to do, if you're trying to coordinate with anybody else, or even just for yourself, is it kind of gets to lay things out. Like here's a flow chart with milestones, and you can kind of lay things out into like subtasks and break it up. So one of the things with to-do lists and where Kanban kind of comes in is that to-do list, you get this really long checklist of things. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to look at all this stuff because there's 25 things on here. I'm not getting all this stuff done today. It's too much to think about. So that by having like cards of like, here's my chores for the day, here's my like notes for the day, and here's these other things, I can kind of group things into like smaller chunks that are more digestible. And then I can kind of go through those individual subtasks. So if I have 10, like I have 6 sessions today, so there'd be 6 notes on my to-do list to do if I'm going to get my notes done on time the same day, then that would be that kind of subtask. And so here's the card in Asana that says notes. It's got 6 appointments on it, and I can check off in Asana to say it's done. So it's a more manageable to-do list. As an example, I would do that in Asana because it's kind of redundant. I'm making a list to check it off, but that coordination among other people, again, especially if you have a team or more than one person working on it, the problem with like an email chain and chats is what you need, the task gets lost in the chat. So the task that needs to get done gets lost in the discussion around how you're doing the task, right? And so again, the project management thing is here's what the task is in a line item, and then here's comments about this particular task in a section that talks about just that one thing. So let's say the task on Asana is doing the dishes, and all of it, like Michelle and Esther and I are all trying to figure out how we're going to do the dishes. So Michelle's like, I'm going to do them by hand because that's what I always did, and dishwashers are stupid, like I don't want to do anything with the dishwasher. And Esther's like, no, I got this like $2,000 fancy like Hobart's the brand that does all the restaurant stuff, if you ever worked in like restaurant. So I got this big industrial thing, it'll take 2 minutes, like all I got to do is load the thing. And so there's a discussion on the tab about how we're going to do the dishes, but the task is there and it still remains undone while we have the discussion. The fact the task still needs done doesn't get lost. We're discussing the how-to part or who's going to do it, right? So to me, I think that's bridging that link of limiting the amount of information so you don't get too overloaded. The task is still clearly identified as needing to be done. There's an assignment of who's going to be responsible for it or maybe collaborate on it. And then there's room for discussion about how we're going to get it done or notes, so that you don't have a big Word doc to-do list with a bunch of comments on the side that people scroll through because I didn't come and check this to read 5 pages worth of stuff. Right. I just want to see the 2 comments about today we're doing dishes in the Hobart, tomorrow should do them by hand, and then Saturday we're just going to buy paper plates and forget the dishes altogether. So, right. So like it's more of like a hub and a way to organize the framing of things, I guess, is it. You can do Kanbans on spreadsheets, by the way. Like my partner does the Kanban thing. She's got an Excel sheet and has a Kanban with a couple different, like a work sheet. And so she'll list things in the to-do column, move stuff in the doing, and move it to the done column. It's very, very, very basic and plain Jane. It works for her. I get Asana and Trello is going to be a little more visual, but same functionality. I think some of it's just, is it helpful to have a little bit of like color options to kind of break things up or not, versus just the block and grid design of a spreadsheet. 50 minutes went by really fast. I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, it's 10 till. So like, is there anything I haven't covered about project management stuff to consider? Like, are you a little more like understanding of where and when you might pick to use one as there versus like, here's our whiteboard. Like if we all had like a break room and had a whiteboard, you could just do it on a whiteboard, right? That would be
my way of doing it, would be like that visual. And not like, I find computers very distracting. And so I don't like necessarily all the stuff that we have to do on a computer. And I think for me, I probably in many ways need to wait to kind of see what the younger kids coming into my practice need or want, to kind of, because they're going to be the people that are probably like, love this. And I will just go to that and then take my notebook out and write everything down on my notebook so that it's visual and in place in my calendar, and let them run with all this online stuff, because it doesn't motivate me. It's just noise. It's hard for me to organize it. Like there's no way you want me to be in charge of organizing a Trello board. And so, but like, I think that's my big thing is I need to wait till I get some kid who's like, this is what they love doing. I will set this up for you, Esther. And I'm like, go for it.
So, fun fact, I asked one of our friends that just graduated high school, I'm like, how did y'all organize group practice? She's like, organize? Like, so they don't, just so you know, that's not it. So unless it's going to be DMs on Instagram, or I don't even know if that might be too old for them. I don't really know, but like, not to like say that everybody in that age bracket's not around organizing, but that's just not how they operate. They would not know how to work a whiteboard. I know that much. Yeah. Well, so let me ask a question this way. Like, is anyone running into challenges about, I have this stuff that I need to like, I have a pile of stuff I need done. I don't have it organized. I need assistance in getting it done. So some of this is going to be a delegation, or it's going to be a collaboration with me. How are you currently handling that pile of stuff?
Well, and I have some of that. Like right now, I'm like, how do I communicate with my counselors when there's an issue with a biller? Like I get a claim back. It's not working. I need them to do some things. What's my best way to communicate to them? And to be able to see that they're doing it, and for them to like, how's that? And right now we do a lot of just like emailing, and it's their responsibility to put it on a to-do list, get it done, and get back to me to say, hey, done, completed. So we just do a lot of either emails or a text. And it's kind of their responsibility to do that. But I have thought about, well, is this when a Trello board would be a better place, so that there is a board that says, that we're sharing the, claims that need to be followed up. Or like, I'll notice that they'll have like a client who owes them like $400. And I'm like, okay, hold on a minute here. Like, we can't be doing that. What's the plan on collecting the money, that kind of stuff.
So, couple thoughts on that. I have an outside biller that handles all my insurance billing. Right. My new one that started in the spring has had more insurance problems than I did my first 2 years of practice. And it's not his fault. It's just between the change health thing and some other stuff, like just, it's been a mess, and us getting really bad information too. So like over the weekend, I got a thing and then went digging in the system. I was like, so I literally just refunded like $600 worth of stuff that we didn't realize we shouldn't have collected, because we didn't know until like this week from the biller that, hey, this is actually off. And so, so those kind of, like, my biller is really good about letting us know on a monthly basis about where stuff's at. So we get a report at the end of it. It shows their credits. We do report what we collect. Sometimes it's updated in their systems. A lot of times though, I literally just go through, and about the 5th or 6th of the month, I'll go through the report, just say, hey, all this is good. I just go in their system and say paid, cleared, and they just knock it off to like owed amounts. But, kind of what you're talking about in terms of having that delay, because I have an outside billing service and I generate a report in my system. I do it once a week, send over a spreadsheet to them of who we saw when and for what. I have a little more attention paid to like outstanding balances and things like that, but I really don't go digging in too much. So, what I would say is probably for you is to have just a recurring task to just say, hey, let me check in at the end of the week, budget in some time on like a Thursday or Friday, or probably a Thursday, maybe if you wanted to get paid by Friday, to just, or have the conversation there about, can you run a report of any unpaid sessions? And then you can do what you're doing now, which is just let the clinician know. And I was letting my new guy know, I was like, because you already have a relationship with the client, can you just ask him about this? Like one of the situations was, we have a young client, one of their parents is footing the bill for their sessions, but because I have things as generic as possible on the bank statement by design, so it just says MCP LLC with nothing to indicate it's counseling, trying to be as private as possible, they flagged it as fraud. So for like a week and a half, I've been waiting to see if Stripe's going to like actually like cancel them or not. Fortunately, they called the bank. It's no big deal. But, I happen to notice it for a whole other random thing. And again, I just go into my EHR, do the direct messaging with my clinician, say, hey, can you ask about this? Everything on there was good. And then it turns out we don't have to worry about the other 2 sessions that didn't go through because the card was blocked because their deductibles have been met and now there's just going to be a $20 copay or something like that. So I think for that, how I would probably project manage things out would just be like on that recurring weekly task for myself. Like, whether you set it up on a calendar, I don't pay any attention to calendar and like notifications anymore at all because there's just too many of them. And I still can't figure out why half my calendar stuff automatically sets up a notification that I have to then go in and manually turn off. It makes me crazy because it doesn't help me. I only want notifications for my building's on fire kind of stuff. But yeah, I would just say for that kind of thing, it doesn't seem like a very project management oriented thing unless you have a biller that you work with and just between you and the biller, you could kind of run a thing that way. And I would probably, knowing what I know about like the security stuff and not wanting to pay $20 a user for like a HIPAA compliant Notion seat or Asana seat, I would just go to Google Workspace, have a spreadsheet, run a thing there, and just say, claims that haven't been paid, or just something that, you could just say, hey, like run a report, here's stuff that's still outstanding we haven't heard back from, and then the stuff that needs attention, just put that on the spreadsheet to track. Because you really just need the needs attention stuff.
Well, and this is some of my thought. Like, do I need a Trello or Asana, or do we just create something in Google Workspace and we share the document and it works great that way? Like, why do I need to go and that's kind of where my thought process is of project, like these kind of project apps, that kind of stuff that go with it.
I miss having a whiteboard, speaking of whiteboards, but so for like really, really overly simplified example. So right now I've got a ton of files on my workspace. The thing is I have to remember where I put those. Where if I have a project management board like Asana or Trello, I can point to all those things. So I can go to my HR thing and say, here's the 5 things that the clinician needs. And if I need to go edit that, this lets me go to one place I can remember to go look versus have to remember which folder did I put it in, thinking I was going to remember where I put it later, which I never do.
That is valid.
Yeah. So to me, having that kind of one-up layer of less noise to figure out where things ended up is where it could be really helpful. And then 2, if I'm looking to create a replicatable workflow for hiring, then because it's in that Asana board that I made as a template, I can duplicate that out and be like, Brent's onboarding in my practice. And so we can duplicate that out. Brent can make a specific board that's Brent's onboarding process to my practice, and we can both track how that's working through that process. So if that makes sense. For me, it's trying to bring things together. Like if you had an encyclopedia, how would you break things up into like volumes in a manageable way so your brain doesn't get overloaded with too much information? Knowing the information's accessible, but not having to like look at all of it all at once. And then also just kind of the 3 of us would be able to coordinate who's on first, what's on second, or whatever the joke is. I can't remember the rest of it, but it's trying to coordinate all that, right? So that we don't end up with redundancies and kind of know this is where people are at whatever particular point. Trello for a lot of people is probably going to be fine. I want a little more customization, so I'll probably stick with Asana. And I know Trello was kind of reducing the number of free seats you got and the amount you could do with the free stuff versus Asana. And there's a whole lot you can do with Asana for free. So I'm kind of just waiting for my couple of crew people to digest the big email I sent out last night about what do we want to do, right? Like, and I think that's another kind of like final note on things. Like deciding how you're going to coordinate comes down to 2 things. Like 1, how any of us organize and think and make sense of the world and information. That's going to have a big influence on the systems we pick, because if the interface doesn't work for us, we're not going to want to use it. So then trying to get other people on board to use it's not going to work. So my 2 little gifts, because I'm a big gift person. So the fax machine smashing from Office Space, I was like, I don't want this. I want the like cute little girl that's in her little Barbie thing drifting out of her driveway with her thumbs up, and just that it should feel good. So you're not going to use systems that you don't enjoy using. So, but something there to kind of coordinate things is needed. And again, if we had a break room, if I had a multi-suite thing with a kitchen, that'd be the easiest thing, but I don't. So we need to figure out a way to do it virtually instead. Especially having an admin person that lives in Colorado, she's not going to be in my break room even when I do have one. So, I'm trying to figure that out. Anyways, any final thoughts? I've got a minute or two I can hang out before we close out this call. So, all right. Well, also Ezra too, I have several friends that still do paper calendar stuff. So if that's you, I admire you. I literally have a thing down here that the last time I tried to write things down by hand, I literally wrote, and it's okay. You don't write things down by hand. You don't need to stress about this anymore. So it's this nice little note to future self. It's don't worry about it. It's okay to not try this again. It doesn't work for you. So know what works for you, or know kind of how you think about approaching things, and try and find a system that'll accommodate that to help you then organize all the different things. All right, enjoy the rest of July, and hope everybody doesn't get blasted out by the crazy weather, because it's been crazy hot, spicy storms here when they've gone through. So anyways, take care, and thanks for coming, and see y'all soon.
Thank you so much for listening to the Practice of the Practice podcast today. These trainings are available in our membership communities. Now, we're going to be opening up our membership communities more than just when we're opening Level Up Week. So if there's one that you are interested in, I would love for you to head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership, where there's more details and you can get notifications when those open up. So if you are in solo practice, just getting going, if you are building and sustaining a sustainable solo practice, Next Level Practice is for you. If you are looking to launch a group practice launch is for you, and Group Practice Boss is for all those group practice bosses out there. I wish I had a better online library of evidence-based resources to use in my practice, and Psychology Tools is the place to get that. Psychology Tools is a smart business tool also that helps you with productivity and efficiency while giving your clinicians and yourself better quality materials to give your clients. You can get 20% off new subscriptions over at psychologytools.com/Joe and use code Joe24 to get 20% off of any new subscription. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.